Hi friends, it's Miss Sharon from Sugar Plum Studio. Thank you for joining me for cake decorating today. One of the kits that we had available for purchase this week was the Galaxy Cake To Go kit, and that's what this video is for. It's going to show you how to put all of those components together and decorate that cake. So before we get started, we want to make sure that we have nice clean hands. You always want to make sure that you wash your hands when you're making food that other people will be eating. It's really important to keep your germs off of that food. So first we're going to make sure that our hands are washed. Then there's two other things you're going to need besides what was in your kit. You're going to need a pair of scissors. This is going to be to cut those piping bags. And you should have a wet towel or some paper towels or something to wipe your hands off, because cake decorating can get a little bit messy. So we always want to make sure that that's close by. And then the last thing you're going to need is something to spread your icing. Now I'm using an offset spatula. That's what we use here at the studio. If you don't have one of these, you can certainly use a butter knife or even the back of a spoon. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is fill our cake. So we have a 2-layer cake here. It's already cut in half, so we're going to go ahead and separate those cake layers. So I'm just going to very gently take off the top, take it off just the very same way you found it, with that crusty part on the top. We don't want to flip it over like this, because all of those loose crumbs are in the middle from when we cut the cake in half. So we want to keep those on the inside. So we're going to go ahead and open our container of icing. And even though our cake is very colorful, we do start out with white icing on the inside and the outside. So we're going to take a nice big scoop of that icing and plop it into the middle. Now I'm using a turntable to decorate my cake. If you don't have a turntable, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to have one, but you can also use the plate and the ring that's inside your microwave. That works just like a turntable does. So if you want to grab that from inside your microwave, you'll have a turntable too. So I put that icing in the middle of my cake, and now I'm going to use my spatula, or you'll use your butter knife or your spoon, whatever you have, to spread that out. And I'm just going to make sure that it's nice and even on the inside of my cake. So it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth, but what I'm looking for is a nice even layer. And I'm just doing the inside. I'm not going over the edges and doing the edges yet. So I'm going to take the top of that cake, put it back on just the very same way I found it, and I'm going to press down lightly to make sure that both of those layers of cake are grabbing onto that icing. Next, I'm going to take care of any icing that's sticking out on the side. So I have quite a bit of icing that kind of fell over my edge there as I did the middle of my cake. So I'm going to take my spatula, or you can take your butter knife or your spoon, and just going to kind of flatten those down. All right, so none of that icing is sticking out of the side. All right, and the next thing I'm gonna do is do the outside of my cake. So we're gonna start off by decorating the cake in white icing, and then we'll add the color in layers afterwards. So there's no one right or wrong way to decorate a cake. Many decorators start by putting the icing on the top of their cake. Some do it on the sides of their cake. I like to decorate the sides of my cake first. I think that it gives me a lot more control over the icing if I'm working on the side, as opposed to piling all the icing on the top. So I'm just going to take a nice scoop of that icing. I'm going to move my spatula back and forth. I'm not worried about it being nice and smooth and perfect right out of the gate. I want to just get the icing on the cake, because there's 2 stages to decorating cake. The first stage is getting the icing on. The second stage is making it smooth and pretty. Right now, I'm not worried about smooth and pretty. What I'm worried about is coverage. I just want to get all of the surfaces of my cake covered. So I take a scoop of icing and I kind of smush it onto the side of the cake. And I keep repeating that scoop and that smush until my cake is covered on the sides. And I'll worry about smoothing all of it out after the whole cake is covered. All right, so I'm just going to continue to do that. A scoop and a smoosh all over the sides of my cake. I want to make sure that I'm bringing the icing all the way from the top edge of the cake down to the cake board. We don't want to be able to see up underneath our cake at all. We want that icing to go all the way from the top to all the way down the bottom. All right, so that's what the sides of my cake will look like. And then I'm going to take the rest of the icing in my container and I'm going to pile that on the top of my cake. So I'm going to use my spatula to spread my icing around and just cover the top and make sure that the entire surface of my cake is covered. You don't want to see any cake peeking through. All right, and now that I have everything covered, now I can worry about smoothing my icing out. So the easiest way for me to smooth my icing out is to hold my spatula or my knife against the side of the cake like this. Now, if you have a turntable, your arm using your spatula or your knife stays still and you turn the turntable. If you don't have a turntable, it's your arm that moves. So you'll hold the spatula or the knife or the spoon against the side of your cake and you'll move your hand around the side. You just want to glide that spatula around the edge of the cake with that whole blade touching the side of the cake so that it's nice and straight and smooth. Now, we don't need it to be perfect, of course, especially since we're going to be adding color to it as well. But you really want to get the sides as even as you can, even if they're not perfectly smooth. So if you have a turntable, you stay in one spot and you turn the turntable. And if you don't have a turntable, then the cake stays in one spot and it's your arm that moves. All right, so I have the sides of my cake relatively smooth, so I'm going to take these top edges and I'm just going to smooth those out as well, taking my knife or my spatula and just dragging them in towards the center of the cake so that my entire cake is covered with icing. I don't see any bits of cake peeking through. I have a nice light coating of icing all over my cake. Now I'm going to clean up my cake board just a bit. You always want to work as neatly as you can when you're decorating a cake because presentation is so very important in cake decorating. So you want to make a nice presentation. All right, so now that we have our cake covered, we're going to start applying color. Now, if you saw the picture, we have like this, nice blended color on the cake that we're going to apply separately from those bags of icing. Now, this is a technique that takes a little bit of patience. Like anything with cake decorating, the more you do it, the better you'll get. So if this is one of your first cakes, if you have to stop the video at any point, to get the hang of doing it, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to do the whole cake from start to finish in this video. The whole purpose of doing a video is so that you can stop, watch it again if you need to, so that you can take all the time that you need to decorate your cake. So in your kit, you have 4 bags of colored icing in our different galaxy colors. So this is where those scissors come in. So you're going to take those scissors and you're going to snip the top of that bag off. All right, just like that. So you don't want to go too big, go on the smaller side. You can always cut the hole a little bit bigger if you need it to be a little bit bigger, but you can never, make it smaller if you cut it too big. So I like cutting mine, so it's just about like that, maybe a 1/2 inch. But the bigger the hole, the easier it'll come out of the bag. So I'm going to take each of those colors, so I'm going to cut the tip off of each of those bags, and then I'm going to pipe dots of that color all over, randomly, all over the surface of my cake. Now, I know that might sound kind of silly, but I promise you it'll all come together. All right, so I'm going to do that with each of those colors. I want to go all in between each of those colors as I do them. We can always add more color. We're not locked into any one amount of color. All right, so I'm going to pipe those dots all over my cake. Kind of looks a little like a polka dot monster or something right now. Picked up my lid there. All right, and a little bit more. So I'm not doing this in any particular pattern. They're all completely random, and I can go back and add more color. So once I have a first layer of dots piped on this cake, I want to go back and look at my knife or my spatula. So it's really important that we start with a clean knife or spatula for this point. So I'm going to take my container of icing, I'm going to wipe the spatula off on the side of the container, and then I'm even going to wipe it off on my rag or my paper towel because I don't want, crusty, crummy bits of icing on this when I do this part. So I'm gonna use my spatula or my knife, whatever you're using, and we're gonna smooth out these dots, and that's gonna create that watercolor layered look of that color. So I'm gonna put my spatula right against the side of my cake, and I'm gonna start lightly pressing against the side. Now again, I have a turntable, so I'm staying in one spot and I'm moving the turntable, but if you do not have a turntable, it's your arm that's going to be moving. So you see just how lightly pressing my spatula against the side of the cake and kind of re-smoothing it gives me this kind of smear of color around my cake. All right, now the more you go back and do this, the more of a blue-gray tone your cake is going to have. So I would say start very light on the darker colors like gray and purple. You can always go back and add more of the like the teal and the blue color. You can certainly pipe a light color over a dark color if it's a little bit too dark in that area. All right, you just want to go back and put all of the color that we want on the cake. All right, and once we've done the sides, we're going to do the same thing with the top. All right, so we're just going to go back with our spatula and go over the top of our cake as well. All right, and again, if there are any areas where I need to add more color, or maybe I had too much gray in one color and want to add a little bit more of the teal or the blue, I can do that. You know, any combination that I want. But I'm happy with this. I kind of like that, you know, spacey color blend there. And it certainly doesn't have to be perfect. You know, we're not looking for a perfectly smooth cake. It's quite all right to have some texture in your icing. And again, you don't want to spread it too much, because the more times that you go over it with your spatula or your knife, the more those colors are going to blend. And we really want them to stay separate and streaky like that. All right, so now that I have my icing the way that I want it, I'm gonna think about my piping bag, my piping tip. So each of you has an empty piping bag in your kit that's fitted with a star tip. So what we're gonna do is take this piping bag and we're gonna fold the top of it down like this. And that kind of makes like a collar or a cuff. And that's gonna help you hold it while you fill the bag. Now you have several options for filling this bag. If you want to pipe single solid colors, you can take one piping bag, drop it in, because we've already cut the tip off of it, so you'll drop the whole bag into that piping bag, and then you can squeeze solid color shapes from that bag, like that. And you can switch colors. If you want to do all solid colors, you could just keep moving those bags in and out and doing solid colors. Or you can combine the colors inside the bag and make kind of a striped piping bag. So how you would do that is by taking each of those piping bags of icing and squeezing some of that icing into the bag. So I did some blue, then I did some teal, then I did some purple, and I'll do a little bit of that gray. So if you see, I put each of those colors into that bag. And then I'm gonna put the cuff of that bag up, gather it together at the top. I always like to give it a little twist because that helps me push the icing down inside. And then I'm gonna use that bag to create swirls and you know, stars, swirls and rosettes of icing all over my cake, wherever I want the design. And all of those colors will come out swirled together. Now, it's up to you whether you want to do multicolors or solid colors or a swirl of color. This is your art. You get to decide what it looks like. You could do any kind of design that you want. I kind of like this cascade that I have going on here, so I'm gonna go with that. All right, and that's how I want those on my cake. So I'm fine with that, and this is your art. You get to do whatever kind of pattern or design that you want. So now that I have my piping done, I'm going to put some of those star sprinkles on. So you have some silver and gold sparkly sprinkles, and you really want to make sure if you're going to use the sprinkles, you have to put them on while the icing is nice and soft, because this icing gets a little dry as it sits, like it dries to the touch just a little bit, and then the icing doesn't, or the sprinkles don't really like to stick once it gets like that. So anywhere you want to put sprinkles, you should do that right away after you pipe. So now I have all my piping the way that I want it. Now I'm going to take those fondant stars that were in my kit and arrange those how I want on my cake. Here and there, there's definitely no right or wrong place to put them. It's your art. You get to decide what it looks like. So that's how you do our Galaxy Swirl Kit. So have fun with the icing. Again, you can certainly stop the video and watch it again if you need to review that technique. You could do a whole different design. You certainly don't have to follow this plan. But thank you so much for joining me for cake decorating. I hope to see you soon in the studio. We'll continue to bring projects that you can do at home, projects that you can do in the studio, and projects that you can do via live virtual instruction. So take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye.